The podcast you're about to watch is a conversation with Drew Thomas, who is a filmmaker, a cinematographer, a documentarian. He has been at every single Coachella from 1999 till 2019, except 2018 because he was filming an actual movie, so he couldn't be at Coachella. So this conversation, we go forth on how he got started in 1999 to film and record the footage for Golden Voice. Like, he is responsible for any footage that you see from 1999, 2001, 2002. He was behind the operation, so it's super cool. I got to ask him some questions. Now, before you actually watch the video, I just want you guys to know that this was pre-recorded last week, right before Coachella was canceled by Riverside County officials. So just so you guys know, this was pre-recorded before the news. So when we talk about speculation whether Coachella was going to happen, we actually dive into when the next Coachella is going to be. I had a blast talking to him. I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. Make sure you guys like this video, subscribe, and share it with a couple of friends. Here's our conversation with Drew Thomas. And did you start recording in 1999?
Yeah. So I am a cinematographer director, and in '99 I shot a music video for a young music video director named Piper Ferguson, and she her roommate was a woman who at the time who worked at Coachella and or worked at Golden Voice, I should say.
Yeah.
And I guess through the grapevine, through her roommate, Piper heard that they were looking for people to film at the first Coachella. And I had, I really, when I got out of school, I immediately started working on a lot of music documentary stuff. I do as a director, I do scripted stuff, but as a cinematographer, I do a lot of unscripted, a lot of music stuff, a lot of music video, that sort of thing. So Piper reached out to me and said, would you be interested in going out? She asked me first, have you heard of Coachella? And I said, no, what's that? And she said, oh, it's the brand new music festival, and it's going to be Beck and Rage Against the Machine and a bunch of other she said the lineup is incredibly good, which it certainly was. 1999's lineup was incredible. And she said, they're looking for people to come out and do some filming. Would you want to do that? By the way, there's no pay. And I said, and this was very early in my career. I was pretty fresh out of school at this time. I sort of had the words from one of our cinema professors echoing in my head, which is that, there comes a time when you need to turning down the free work and only accepting paid work. Because, well, for all the obvious reasons. So I said, I appreciate you thinking of me, but I can't do this one. I got to stick around and just really only take paid work. And we got off the phone, and I was thinking about it, and I was like, was I maybe to say no? And some of those bands, Rage Against the Machine, and there's some amazing bands playing there. Geez. So I called her back and said, I was thinking about it and so on and so forth. And she said, look, I spoke to them. They can pay you a little money, but you have to go meet with the head of Golden Voice tomorrow.
Okay.
And I said, okay, cool. Actually, it might have even been, this is a long time ago now, so forgive me, but it might have even been the same day. It might have been, you got to go see him today. It was really fast. And I said, okay. And, I don't want to get too technical, but especially at this time, I was still shooting mostly film. Matter of fact, all the early years of Coachella were shot mostly on film.
Wow.
And Super 16 film. And, I owned and still do own a few film cameras. And I had been in multiple situations. I'd shot part of a TV special with Carlos Santana, where I was the one film camera and there was, I don't know, 16 video cameras. Mind you, this is so long ago. This is in the days before HD. I mean, HD existed, but really, I don't even think there were any consumer sets out, or if they were incredibly expensive and not that good. So this is before the dawn of HD, really, at least in the consumer world. When I did specials like this, like the Santana special, or when I was in situations where I was the only film cameraman, usually shooting B-roll,
Yeah.
and on these music specials, and you can't tell from Zoom probably, but I'm quite tall. I'm almost 6'6". And I always felt like the redheaded step cameraman that nobody wanted there, always in the way. They hadn't rehearsed with me there. So if I'm trying to squeeze between cameras and get shots, I'm usually in somebody's way, and not this small waifish person that can sort of fly out of situations without being noticed, unfortunately. I often wish I were. So this is what I expected with my first meeting with Golden Voice. Is I expected to walk into a full-on production meeting and be the last one to the game, basically the newest crew member, the one who's not up to speed on anything. And I was just like, wow, okay, well, this is gonna be what it's gonna be. So I go to this meeting. It was at Golden Voice's original offices, which were in a home up on Sunset, right near a Ralph's, what they call Rock and Roll Ralph's up there. So this is back, this is still the tail end of the days when Golden Voice was a little punk and ska promoter, and really still quite a small company, really a small company. And I get there and I'm meeting with Paul Tillett, who I didn't know this at the time, but is the head of Golden Voice. And again, I expect to walk into a room full of people and have to sort of navigate being the newest person to the in the situation. And instead, I get there and it's just me and Paul, just the two of us. And he says to me, well, we're creating this new music festival, and I think it's going to be something kind of special. And he said, and I think we need to document it. And I said, cool. I said, I think that's a great idea. I love the old Woodstock documentary, but who do you have? Do you have a team? Do you have what do you have as far as crew? And he looks at me and he goes, it's just you. That's all. That's all we got. It's just you.
Just you.
Yeah. And I said, okay, well, when's the festival? And he said, it starts Saturday. This was a Monday.
Wow.
So I said, okay, all right, well, I'll write up a budget and I'll get back to you and figure it out. And I went home and I remember quite clearly imagining in my mind a forking road, a divergent path. One path, I call him up and I say, hey, Paul, I'm really sorry. There's just not enough time to put together a production for what this really needs. And so thank you, but no. And the other part of me said, you know what? They can't expect that much under the circumstances.
Yeah.
So, just try it. And I immediately got on the phone with friends and started calling in favors. I wrote up a budget. I had no idea how much to write the budget for, how much I could get away with, what they would have for it. I do remember that as I was leaving, I was watching them make hand painted signs advertising for tickets for Coachella. I mean, it was
like
Golden Voice crew members in the parking area of their offices with big paint markers making signs to advertise Coachella. And so I said, okay, well, this is definitely, a grassroots operation. So chances are they don't have extra money lying around for this. So I wrote up a very modest budget, especially considering we were shooting film, of $10,000.
Yeah.
And that's multiple crew members. I should mention that they provide housing for us, though that took some doing. So that wasn't in the budget line. But if I made $20 on it, I'd be shocked. And yeah, so we shot a year, and I don't know how much your audience knows, but about this, but the early Coachellas were not profitable. Quite on the contrary, the first Coachella, despite its insane lineup, almost bankrupted the company.
Yeah, and I read some stuff about how they lost money in the first few. That's why they didn't have a festival the following year, right? In the year 2000.
Correct. Yeah, the first Coachella was in October of '99. There was no festival in 2000, and then out of the blue, early in 2001, I get a call from Paul saying, we're doing a Coachella. It's going to be one day only. It's going to be in April. And Jane's Addiction is playing.
Okay.
And I said, cool. And yeah, so that's sort of how it started. That's exactly how it started. We just took it on, and I had this little team. But in the early years, it was, we were shooting mostly film. As HD came out, actually, we had at least one HD camera in 2001. The trick is HD cameras had existed for a little while, but the difference is we wanted to shoot only in 24 frame per second, 24p HD.
Yeah.
The reason is that's the frame rate of movies. And it was important to me that even though it was more expensive, and even though it meant we would have fewer minutes of footage, fewer hours of footage, it was important to me that anything we did shoot would be on an archival format. So to this day, somewhere, I assume in Golden Voice, in vaults rented by Golden Voice, there is stacks and stacks of film negative. And then so only when 24p HD came into existence, which I think was early 2001 or late 2000, Sony came out with a camera called the F900. Only when that was a viable alternative to film did we start shooting in HD, which was, of course, HD, even though at that point HD was very expensive, it was still less expensive film by a significant margin. And it really, you could cut it side by side and it was hard to tell the difference.
That's cool. What's
at least on video.
What was your approach? Because shooting on film, since you have to have you don't have today, our camera's digital, you could just record forever as long as you have memory cards. So when you're filming, do you already know that you couldn't, do you already have a plan? I can't record so much because I don't have an infinite amount of film, or how does that process work?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So, we were shooting with cameras called Aton X Prod, I think they were called, Super 16 cameras. And they had these nice cartridge shaped loads that you would click on the back of it. You'd pull one off and click a new one on. What's great about them is you could preload these cartridges, or have your assistant camera persons preload these cartridges with film, and they clicked on instantaneously. It was a very good design, but each cartridge held 11 minutes of film.
Wow.
So you're shooting a 40-minute set, maybe 45-minute set, and our team was small enough that we were basically going to be at one stage at a time. Sometimes at the main stage, sometimes at the outdoor theater, sometimes at one of the big tents. I think that by the second year, I had broken it into two teams. First year, we might have had 1.5 teams, something like that. But what we would do is we would put a camera, an HD camera that could roll, that was rolling on, I think, 50-minute loads. That would be at the front of house position near the sound mixer. And that camera would roll entire sets. And so what that would allow us to do is, if we only were going to get 4 songs by a band or 3 songs by a specific band, depending on how much film we had, how much film we were devoting to one artist versus another, what we could do is if we could get a set list, we would mark on the set list which songs we want to roll on. And then we would, I think, walkie-talkie to each other. Okay, we're rolling on the next song. Everybody roll, so on. But also, if something went wrong, if we missed the very beginning of a song, we knew we had it on the one HD video camera that was rolling full time.
Okay.
And, or if something else went wrong, a camera, went down or had to change loads, we knew we always had the front of house position as sort of our anchor shot. But in this way, it really was like we really shot in the style of the original Woodstock film. That was shot in 35, but by the time we were shooting, 30 years later, film stock Super 16 was probably, I don't want to get out over my skis here, but the quality of film had gotten so much better that Super 16 was really comparable, if not better resolution, probably than or at least less apparent grain than those old 35 millimeter stocks. So,
yeah.
But yeah, from what I understand, the way they shot Woodstock 69 was just run and gun, sometimes just 2 cameras. Sometimes it seems like 1 camera on during a certain song. But I think that style really lends itself to rock documentary, because it's much more of a feeling of actually being there. I've shot every Coachella except for one. And the only Coachella I didn't shoot was 2018 because I was overseas making a movie. But I've never wanted there to be a crane arm with a camera on it. I think the drones are of limited usability when covering music. I think there's types of music. I think electronica, I think you can get away with less subjective camera, less, more just flash and style and so on. But personally, my instincts always tend to handheld camera, where the camera is as close to a fan's perspective as possible.
Yeah. To capture the vibe. Yeah.
Exactly, to capture the vibe, to feel like you're really there, like as if you went to the festival yourself, and either you happen to get right up to the front of the crowd at the stage, or you were lucky enough through a friend or whatever that you got to sit at the edge of the stage and watch from there. And so most of the camera's perspectives in the original film are that. They're except for the front of house camera, which we absolutely used as a safety. We rolled from the pit where literally, if an audience member reached out, they could touch the back of my head. So that's how close to that perspective we tried to film.
Yeah, I watched the Coachella documentary. I watched it for the first time in 2017. I want to say 2017, 2018. And I rewatched it recently prior to the interview. And I really like you actually get what you're talking about, though. Like, you get those shots of the crowd, and you're like in the crowd, and some of it's like shaky footage. And even the beginning, you have the shots of like pulling up to the desert. Did you edit the footage yourself too, or was that like you had an editor?
I had an editor, a buddy of mine named Greg Nash, who was film school, and he he works on various TV shows now as a post-production producer, executive producer in post. He still edits all the time. He's a terrific editor. And he edited the whole film. And what we did was, in the early years, I can't remember exactly if it was 2002 or 2003, we ran a little contest where we would give people a couple free passes, a couple of VIP passes actually, to Coachella if they documented their experience. And they could, in that case, they could use little video cameras. I think this was early enough that nobody had good cameras on their phones. I feel like I had like an Ericsson phone at that time. I can't remember. Anyway, people who had camcorders of decent quality could bring them to the festival, could document what they did. And so, we did have footage of somebody breaking down by the side of the road. We did have, there's huge parts of these stories that aren't there, but, like we had somebody who literally snuck in from Mexico to go to the festival.
Oh, I saw that on the documentary, that dude I was talking about. That's cool.
Yeah. So, again, just trying to get as close to what the experience would be like, just so everything felt real. There's parts of the film that I think were necessary for context, but that sort of don't have the texture of the rest of the film. And I think that all the creators, myself, Paul Tillett, Bill Fold, all the guys from Golden Voice, and me and Greg, we probably all agree that when that film is at its best, it's really just giving you special moments from the early years of Coachella. And that's really when it's at its strongest, I think.
Yeah, you really get the perspective from different people, because you showed people in the tents, and some people had small tents, bigger tents, and people struggling with the wind. Some people talking about the weather. Some people talking about how cold it is at night with the wind. Some people it's 110 degrees. Even some artists saying they have to perform when it's 111 degrees. And like people that have been to the festival, they know how the weather changes, and everybody does have a different experience. I think one of the fans mentioned how you could go with the group. And I've gone to the last 10 Coachellas. I live here locally, so I've been to the last 10 years. And it is always true. Like you could go with a group of people, and every single one of those people will have a different experience, because you go to see different acts, different bands, different artists at different stages. And even the angle and where you're standing changes your perspective, because you could be by speaker, you could camp or make your way to the front, you could be on one side, you could be all the way in the back. It's just so cool about the festival. I really love the whole vibe.
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah, I think that was one of the situations like where that's what makes it tough to make a Coachella movie. And we spent a long time editing, and there was big parts of it that the editor and I thought were terrific. Golden Voice guys wanted something different. And I would say they were probably right most of the time, almost all the time. Not every example, but nearly every example. But the thing is this, especially the early years, especially probably the first, I don't know, 8-9 years of Coachella, maybe 7 or 8 years of Coachella. It was still sort of indie feeling. It's still an incredibly important festival. It still introduces people to new acts that they wouldn't know about otherwise. It's still, I think, one of the most, if not the most important music festival in the Western Hemisphere, at least. Making a movie about it was always going to be fraught. And I think we've got a pretty good score on IMDb. And I think in general, our reviews were very good. Though I should mention, one of our reviews out of a San Francisco paper criticized the film because it said we failed to capture the long tedium that come with going to a music festival. And I said, well, if you're accusing me of not having enough boring parts of the movie, yeah, okay, I can take that criticism. Like, we definitely didn't include tedious stuff, but at least I hope we didn't. But everyone, sort of what you're saying, Angel, is like, you know, everyone has their own Coachella, and especially, you know, if you've gone, you've had an amazing time. Let's say, you know, gosh, let's say you went in 2004, which might have been the best lineup of any Coachella ever. Radiohead played that year, and let's say you go and you had an amazing time. You know, maybe you got separated from your friends, but you still ended up in the crowd with some really cool people. Maybe you met some new people, and you know, you saw Radiohead and the sound was incredible. And then you went to a tent and you saw a band you'd never heard of, but like absolutely fell in love with them. And you just had a life-changing weekend. Well, now this film comes out, and gosh, that band that you fell in love with, which is now one of your favorite bands, isn't even in the documentary. But you're going to think, well, what the heck? How could they not include band X, whatever that is? And that's not wrong. You know, that was their experience. Everyone has a very personal and often a very proprietary experience with Coachella. And I think that was only more the case when it was a smaller, more indie festival. And so, you know, it was definitely like wading into a minefield, making something, a depiction. It was sort of like adapting somebody's favorite book, you know, into a movie. You know, you're never going to nail the experience of reading the that they had by themselves in their imagination. The voices are all going to sound, it's always going to be, and especially if it's something really special to them, imagine it in just such a way, and this is what the protagonist looks like. And you know, it's very hard to, or probably impossible to capture something like a Coachella in a way that's going to be satisfactory to a whole lot of the real fans.
It's just
we
hard
try to do our
because
best, but
there's not enough time. There's not, you don't have to make like a 20-hour documentary or something, because there's just so much going on over the weekend, especially if you factor in that's multiple years. That a lot of people are not complaining, but they felt like the Nuke documentary, the 2021, that kind of painted the whole picture of the whole festival. It was like, oh, they didn't have this, or that was too quick. But especially when you're doing something that's 20 years in the making, like, how are you gonna have, it's like you said, the moment that was so special to you, it's not gonna be part of the documentary because maybe it didn't fit the story, or there's a narrative they have to tell. You know, it's just hard for that to happen.
100%. Yeah, and yeah, I feel for Chris Perkle, director of 20 Years in the Desert, the new Coachella documentary. He did an excellent job, and I know he was serving many masters. And you know, I mean, again, I've read a couple of the reviews. People seem to be really into it. I think that the scores for both documentaries on IMDb, at least last I checked, which was months and months ago, I think they were pretty much in a, you know, exactly the same range. But yeah, I mean, short of having a streaming, you know, YouTube channel, which of course does exist during the weekends of Coachella, but where somebody could go almost make their own documentary by typing in a list of bands and songs and then having it just come up and play, like sort of a Coachella video jukebox, if you will.
Yeah,
that would probably be the only way to satisfy everyone's tastes. And again, you know, that's a completely understandable reaction to watching something that for a lot of people is you know, a very personal, very special and unique, completely unique experience for them.
And Coachella's a little bit exclusive when it comes to videos and performances because you don't find a lot of them on YouTube or online. Like they do stream them during the YouTube like live stream during like Coachella weekends, and then
Mhm.
you're most likely never gonna find those shows again, or unless somehow you downloaded it or you were screen recording or something. But now I know social media, everybody gets takes footage at the festival, and the times have changed, but you still don't get to see those performances anymore. It's like if you were there or you saw it live that time, and then it's gone for whenever Golden Boys decides to stream it again.
Yeah, it's really true. And frankly, I have to say that I'm all in favor of that. In the end, these artists are performing. They're performing their music. They might be doing covers. It is all their intellectual property. It's so hard for musical artists to make a living these days, that they have a right to protect their creations, their intellectual property, and also selfishly, especially the first 10 years of Coachella. um, you would still see the later years. You still saw people with their cameras up shooting video and stuff, but for the most part, they were very strict about who could. It's not like Burning Man where there might be 10 competing documentaries.
Yeah,
My documentary and Chris Perkel's documentary, the only two documentaries that exist of note on Coachella. They're created. They're The production company of note is Golden Voice. They're
yeah.
created by the creators of Coachella, and believe me, even though they're the first one's my creation, the second one's Chris's creation. They Paul particularly has an enormous influence on exactly how these documentaries are going to turn out. And um, it's the brand of Coachella. Let me just change topics here for just a moment. I can't tell you, even in the earliest years of Coachella, even when Coachella was losing money, people would come up to us and, oh, it's gotten so corporate. Coachella's gotten so corporate. And I would say to them flatly, no, it hasn't. It has not. It is, you know, in one of maybe year 3 or 4 of Coachella, Chrysler had a new car coming out, and they contacted Golden Voice, and they said, look, we want to put one of our Chrysler cars, this new car, it was, I think, the Chrysler Crossfire, but don't quote me on that. We want to put it in its own tent on the polo grounds, unmarked. You don't need to put a Chrysler sign anywhere. You don't need to have a brochure outside. You don't need to have balloons. Unmarked tent somewhere on the polo grounds. If somebody happens to wander into the tent, there'll be a Chrysler Crossfire in there, and maybe some brochures they can take, or a spokesperson or something. And I don't remember the exact number, but mind you, this is when Coachella was either barely breaking or still losing money.
Mm-hmm.
And this was not a small amount of money that was offered to them to do this very modest thing. And it was a flat no. It was, sorry, we can't do that. Now, of course, people will point out that, well, geez, even in the time there was Heineken. Heineken had its name around
The
stuff.
tent, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
I mean, they have to provide refreshments, and they had to make certain deals just to make it even possible. They did not want to have $10 waters. Even in my earliest meetings with Golden Voice, they said, look, whatever Woodstock 99 was, we want to do the opposite. We don't want to gouge people for water, especially when it's 100 degrees. We don't want people to feel like they're getting nickel and dimed everywhere they turn. And yes, Coachella has gotten. It's not an inexpensive weekend at all. But I will say this, and again, it's been years since I've been in these meetings, but in the first 10 years of Coachella, I was in a lot of these meetings, and it really, even for the people who don't have the VIP, even just the general audience, it was a very curated experience. I sat in Paul Tillet's trailer. He and I were meeting and talking about what band cover and so on. And somebody walked in and was talking to Paul, and Paul was asking that trailers that were outside the main fence that borders the whole festival, he wanted them moved back 10, 15 feet at least, because some of these trailers for various vendors and stuff were parked so close to the fence that you could read the name of whatever brand it was. I don't know whatever beer brand or food brand, whatever that was, U-Haul, whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted those trucks moved far enough back outside the fence line so that if you were inside Coachella, your vista was not marred by a bunch of product names. There's no big Diet Coke banners or Pepsi banners or that junk still isn't there. And yes,
Well,
I mean,
today's
sorry, go ahead.
I feel like it's still a little bit not more corporate, but they do partner to create experiences. So they do it in a creative way. So I don't remember what year it was, maybe 2010, 11. They used to have like a PlayStation, like trailer where you go in, you play PlayStation, and you could compete to win like VIP prizes. And then they had like HP that sponsors the big Arctic Dome now. And then you have I think they had like the Sephora tent or something, but they're all experiences. They're not just, they're just a sponsor. Like it's a way you cool down. It's a way to explore the festival. And I think 2019, they were trying to do like kind of like a game where the more experiences and the more tents that you go to, you could like get prizes or earn tokens or something like that. So they kind of, because I think with just how big it got, you have to kind of, like you said, you don't want to, how much water would it take to provide for 120,000 people? It's just you're gonna be paying so much. So I never really thought of it that way, that the sponsors make things more affordable for the regular people.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, again, this is totally outside my wheelhouse, but it does make sense to me that you could go to these food sponsors and say, look, you can be the beer that is sold at Coachella, but you're not going to sell it for $10 a cup or whatever that is. You're going to sell it for $4 or $5. I mean, again, I've literally never bought a cup of Heineken at Coachella ever. I've always been busy working, but so I don't know how much they cost. But I know that particularly early years, and I can't speak to the later years because I haven't been in those meetings in a long time, but it really was about making the experience as good as possible for every festival goer. One year I was invited to it was for everybody at Golden Voice, a big lunch meeting. And Paul got up and they had printed photos from the previous year onto big pieces of foam core. And the photos were aerial photos taken from a helicopter line of people waiting in line to get into the festival. And he showed them, and the lines were long, and people were in line for a couple hours or whatever. And Paul Tillet to these pictures and said, this can never happen again. He said, we need to figure out how to safely get people in. They're not standing in the sun waiting to get frisked and their possessions checked and whatnot. This, whether it's multiple points of entry, whatever that is. And, I mean, it's like anything else. It's a huge logistical operation.
Yeah.
And, they're going to make mistakes every year. I guess, Paul's point probably was like, let's not make the same mistakes. We know we're going to make mistakes. That's unavoidable, but let's not make the same mistakes. Also, and we have a quote from Flea in the original documentary. Yes, but another thing that I think that I think Coachella proved was that America could put on a music festival that wasn't going to devolve into fights, into violence, into fires. And certainly it's not the only example of this, but maybe at the time it was an important example because Woodstock 99 had just happened. But, I remember one year at Coachella, there was a very good turnout. I think maybe we were at capacity or close to it. And there was something like 4 fights all weekend long. They were talking about it on the local news. You're from Indio, so you would know better than I would, but it's been interesting. I've talked to locals over the years. We actually did, it's never been released, but we did a mini documentary called Coachella Parking Lot, where we went to the parking lot of the Ralphs, very close to the polo fields.
Yeah.
Interviewed all the people coming to Coachella and loading up on their supplies for their tents or whatever. But whereas you might think that a lot of people in the area would resent the festival, it doesn't really seem to be that way. At least not from people I've spoken to.
No, everybody loves it. I know some you have the people that complain, but most of the people really love it because one, it brings so much business to the local economy because, like you're saying, every local store, there's people that's trying out different foods. There's people that work the festival. It provides so much work opportunities, and then a lot of people that I know, a lot of us locals go to the festival because it's in our backyard. We don't have to worry about buying plane tickets or worrying about travel. Like it's just, oh, I live 10 minutes from the festival. You just have to kind of find the tickets. And I just as when you said the point about like you didn't want any big fighting or any riots and stuff happening at the festival, it's one of the nicest places, like any festival, because I've been to other music festivals. I haven't been to like European ones, but other local festivals, and it's just everybody's so friendly at Coachella. Everybody is just like the nicest person, and I don't know. I think it's just everybody there knows it's kind of like paradise for 3 days. You forget about your corporate world and your problems, and you just have fun exploring music, and everybody's there for the same reason.
100%, and you really do see that. That and I don't know if it's because of Indio, if it's because of the way the festival's been formed, but it really does have that. There's not this sort of sense of anger. Oh, I've got to get to the front, and I've got to get my best festival experience and get out of my way. It's interesting. Have you ever seen the documentary? It's a documentary about the Rolling Stones by the Maysles brothers called "Gimme Shelter."
No, I haven't seen it, to be honest. No.
So let me recommend something to you and to your audience. If you get a chance, because I think it's very telling, watch the original Woodstock from 1969, the Woodstock documentary called 3 Days of Peace and Love.
I think I've seen that one. I've seen that one.
That one, I mean, that's probably my favorite of all time. And then watch Gimme Shelter about the Rolling Stones. Both widely available, probably both on Blu-ray, probably both streaming. Gimme Shelter is about a festival that took place in Altamont, California. The Rolling Stones, who hadn't played Woodstock 69, wanted to do their own music festival, free music festival in California. And Mick Jagger infamously said, and he says it in the documentary, we want to show America how this can be done, how to do this. And they ended up, they hired the Hells Angels to provide security for the music festival, and it's well documented. Somebody ended up getting killed, and it's really extraordinary. It's upsetting to watch, but it's extraordinary that you watch a festival sort of go down in flames. It's I recommend watching both of those so you can see how, even though Woodstock 69 had plenty of troubles, I mean, it was not supposed to be a free festival that ended up being a free festival. And like they talk about in that documentary, a lot of people lost a lot of money.
Yeah.
Though I've heard since, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard since that the film certainly haven't seen the numbers, but that's what I've heard.
Yeah, the Woodstock documentary, it looked, I mean, I bet it was unbelievable to be in that experience, and we were just like driving and picking people up in the cars and stuff. But also, like, I don't know, it looks so unorganized. Like, I feel like if you were there, just like dealing with all the mess, no food, no bathrooms, no showers. I don't know, it feels like it wasn't as cool as we look at back. Everybody puts that one on a pedestal, like the greatest festival ever and stuff. But I don't know. I was just thinking like it probably wasn't that great for the most part when you have so much problems. But yeah.
Yeah, they got tons of rain too,
Yeah.
and really bogged down in the mud. I'm sure the trash was unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, I think it was probably an amazing, life changing experience to do once.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
uh, I wasn't alive at the time. You definitely weren't alive at the time.
No.
But yeah. I suppose probably the closest experience as far as putting up with inconvenience and trouble and dirt and so on would be Burning Man. Though Burning Man is certainly a lot drier than Woodstock, New York. Um, but yeah, I think that the vibe that Coachella creates, and I hope it is still this way. I think it probably is, even though they've made changes, even though Golden Voice is now owned by AEG Live, and there have been choices made, I think, that might not have been made in the old Golden Voice days, but I still think, actually, I know that it is still top priority of those people. And I look, I don't work for Golden Voice. Um, I basically work for Golden Voice for 2 weekends a year.
Hmm.
I don't have stock in any of this. So I don't mean to sound like an advertisement, but I know, because I know the people involved, and I know that they take an enormous amount of pride in making that festival as curated an experience, and as incredible experience as possible. And not just from the music certainly, but the art too. I mean, it is the
Yeah.
Coachella Music and Art Festival, and sometimes some of the things they pull off with the art is just mind blowing. Um,
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes they come up with some incredible art pieces, and the only thing is, what was your take on like the evolution of music? Because you were there since the beginning, and you said it was more of an indie festival, the bands and stuff, and now EDM. Like on that documentary that you did, there was people talking about like electronic music, and it was kind of like barely hitting. It was kind of its own niche, and now EDM is so heavy at Coachella, the Sahara tent. You have hip hop became over the last like 4 or 5 years one of the most dominant genres. Just not only in Coachella, but just in like in music in general. Is like one of the, I think probably the highest consumed music now, stream wise and stuff. So how do you how do you feel about like transitioning from that indie bands to now being just like the cultural forefront of music? It's when you mentioned it's one of the best music festivals in the world. It is the number one music festival when it comes to pop culture, like hands down.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's tough for me to answer because you know I'm I'm from the indie music and indie film world. Um, when I was a teen, that was the late 1980s, and we were in post punk, and we wore our indie cred as a badge of honor. I was in the band. If a band that you loved had one of their songs in some network TV show, or even worse, a TV commercial, that felt like a betrayal. Um, and so my instincts are, to cringe a little bit when I hear about Beyonce playing Coachella. Um, but the fact of the matter is I filmed Beyonce. Not that was the one Coachella I missed. Younger than me. I don't know if there was definitely a sense that, you know, if a band got too popular, they were a sellout, right? Well, it's really hard. Like I mentioned earlier, it's really hard for artists to make money these days.
Mhm.
With streaming, with people being able to get music for free, um, with the music industry being what it is right now, whatever the reason or combination of reasons, I don't begrudge an artist now wanting to have their song in a movie, wanting to have their song in a TV show. Um, because they need to survive. They deserve to be compensated for their work. Yes, they should protect the work. And I remember I forget who the artist was, but I did an interview with an artist, and they said, look, if if a Preparation H came along and asked us to put our song in their ad, no, we probably wouldn't do that. There's a lot of situations where we would say no, but if a movie came along, or even a good TV show, and they wanted us for their soundtrack, that's probably something we would consider very seriously. And they said, so it becomes about, yes, you've got to control where your work goes, um, but it's not a flat no, unless you're the Japan droids, in which case it is a flat no. But uh, it the times have changed, and I think that it's probably old thinking, old school thinking, for me to not want to see pop artists at Coachella. It's not as though those pop artists have replaced all the indie artists at Coachella. Um, there might be a huge headliner who's a gigantic pop star like Beyonce, but you still can go to any of the tents or even the outdoor theater and see really cutting edge, obscure acts. You know, I sort of came up listening to rock and roll, so I love seeing the indie rock bands. Um, I love seeing the National, I've seen Interpol, and certainly smaller artists, the Cloud Nothings, and some of my favorite rock artists. But they're still at Coachella, but the market has moved away from that genre. Like you say, EDM, other forms of electronic, uh, hip hop. Hip hop is I think, the biggest consumer music in the world. Uh, I mean, in 2018, as I mentioned, I was overseas. I was in Central Asia making a movie, and all those, all the young people in those countries love
Yeah.
hip hop, and they're making hip hop. They worship American hip hop artists, and so I mean, it's, again, I don't think a year will go by where there will be no rock and roll at Coachella. I think there'll always be rock artists there, but I think the ratio is probably tilted significantly towards electronic, towards hip hop, towards international music.
Hmm.
The last Coachella I was at, because the last Coachella that happened 2019, um, uh, there was a real push to have artists from all over the world, and I think that's also, I think they're staying smart, and I think they're staying ahead. The Golden Voice guys are staying ahead of of the curve,
Yeah.
really.
Well, that's something that somebody else said in your documentary. Well, not the same thing, but they said that you come to Coachella and you listen to instruments that you've never heard of before live. Like, I've never even heard of this instrument and listening to it at Coachella. Well, it's the same thing. You're listening to, like, I watched one of those K-pop groups, Blackpink, perform last 2019, and I didn't even know who they were. But my niece, she's like 15 at the time, so she was really huge on K-pop, Korean pop, and stuff. She told me to check them out, and I would never go see a K-pop concert ever in my life, but because they were at Coachella and I've heard they were huge, I went to check it out, and it's something completely different. Then you have now they had a couple of Mexican bands playing there. Like, I never thought I was gonna see Mexican bands playing, and then you have I've seen Yell back in 2000, I don't know, 2013, 2009. I forgot what year it was. My first year was 2009, so I didn't get to experience the years before that. But I've seen French artists, like artists from all over the world that I would never see in concert. So that's one of the things too. Even though you have genres and artists that you don't like, there's certain artists that you're never gonna see, or you would never pay your money to go or go out of your way to go pay for that artist, but you get a chance to see them at Coachella, and you could say, "Oh, I see the appeal. I see why people like this," or "It's not for me." You know, you could give it a try, and a lot of times you end up discovering a lot of artists that some people just you've never even heard of, and then just become fan of them.
Yeah, exactly. It's still all about discovery. In 2019, initially they had hired me and they said that they were going to send me out with my own team, basically me, a camera assistant, maybe a production assistant or somebody, and just our own golf cart, and we would just roll around and film whatever we wanted, which sounded like a dream to me. Then some things changed. They lost some crew members, and they said, "Look, we want you to be part of our cinema unit, but we're going to need to have you stick around. And mostly weekend one, you'll be filming at the outdoor theater, which is the second largest stage. Weekend two, you'll be filming at the main stage." So I wasn't seeing quite the cross section of artists that I would in a normal year for me doing what I do. Yet still, there's bands coming at both those stages that I'd never heard of. And yeah, like you say, some of them blew me away. Some of them was that evening or the following morning downloading songs by. But paying for them, by the way. In some cases, I didn't like them. That wasn't for me. But I wouldn't have seen them if I weren't there. I wouldn't have seen them if I weren't at Coachella. There's no way that I would bother. You know, through my work, I've also filmed a K-pop band. I think it was BTS, though I don't quote me. I can't remember. But again, there's no way that I would go and buy a ticket for that unless I was
Yeah.
taking somebody like a niece or a nephew who was really into it. So it's still about discovery, and I think, like I say, I think that for all the criticism that Coachella's gotten the past few years about getting more and more quote commercial or selling out or what have you. I know for a fact that they're still trying to make it a very special and important experience, and really try to expose the ticket holders to things that they might not otherwise see, and hopefully introduce them to what will become their next favorite bands.
Yeah, and now the indie bands become truly indie because now they're not the mainstream stuff that's coming to the festival at the top of the headline. And what I was gonna ask you about, what is like your number one memory about? You've been to almost every Coachella, so what is like the number one performance that you could say that one? Not biased, because I know you have some bands that you like personally, but you just say, "Wow, that was crazy."
Yeah, that's really tough. There's some of them are in the original film. Um, anytime Rage Against the Machine plays, uh, that's something to behold. Oh my gosh, who were the Willow Creek artists that we filmed? I can't remember. I can't remember all of them, but interesting. Public Enemy. Public Enemy played the outdoor theater. I think, I don't know, 2009, 2010, somewhere in there, maybe a little later. And I was sitting on stage, and I had both a film camera with me and a digital camera with me, and mostly shot digital, but I also shot a bunch of film, slow-mo and stuff. Flavor Flav jumped into the audience. There's so many moments. There's a Canadian band called Metric, and one of probably their lead, they've got a bunch of singers in the band. It's a multi-instrumental band, probably 9 members or something like that. But their singer's name is Emily, one of their singers, maybe their lead singer. And I had called, probably expecting to speak to a manager to ask, I forget what year this was, maybe 2010, maybe 2011, maybe earlier, to ask if it was okay if my team filmed them for the purposes of some future documentary. And I get a call back from her. I get a call back from the lead singer of this band that at the time I had one of their CDs parked in my CD player in my car, listening to them a ton. And she calls me up and she says, "Yeah, please, we saw the original movie, the 2006 movie. We'd love to, please come film us. We can talk about the details later. But yeah, by all means." And she and I get to talking, and we just started joking around about slang. I think I may have said "right on" or something like that, something nerdy, some like holdout from times before I was born. And we started talking about slang. And I said, I'm trying to bring back the expression "far out." I'm trying to, of course I was joking, but I want people to start saying "far out" again. And she said, "All right." And so I'm filming her. I'm in the pit now, surrounded by press photographers with a camera on my shoulder and my whole team around, 5, 6 cameras, however much we had, everyone filming. And she comes to the microphone and she says, "Talking to a friend of mine this morning, and he wants to bring back this expression. So I just have to say, Coachella, you're far out." And they break into a song. And it's just, there's literally, Angel, there's hundreds of moments. I did an interview with one of my favorite bands of all time, a band called The National. And shooting an interview with these guys, we literally sat at a picnic table somewhere backstage and just talked to them. And one of the band members comes out with solo cups and he's pouring us all beers. And I'm sitting there having beers and just chatting while filming an interview with one of my favorite bands of all time. And just what an incredible privilege for me to be able to to do that. As you know, a cinematographer director who just basically lucked into a job filming at Coachella. Um,
That's awesome.
I probably can't enumerate all the amazing experiences. I mean, in 2019, I was filming Tame Impala, and I was standing at the edge of the stage up on a 4 5 foot rise or something like that. And they shot more confetti than I've ever seen in my life, more lasers than I've ever seen before that moment. Um, I had a hoodie on because, as you know, it gets cold at night, Coachella
Hmm.
sometimes. My hood was full of confetti. And you know, I was finding confetti for weeks after that in my clothes and everywhere. So there, you know, Angel, there's been dozens and dozens of experiences, mostly amazing, um, that some are just, they just happen at Coachella. Some are because I've had the privilege of being able to be places at Coachella, and be right next to artists that I've loved, you know, for a long time.
Were you there in 2012 when they did the hologram Tupac at the main stage?
So I was there, but we had a separate team at the main stage. So I did not see that with my own eyes until later on digital. It was one of those cases where we only had so many people and we were stretched too thin. I'm sure I was at another stage. You know, the way we set it up in some of the middle and later years of Coachella was there was a full-time team at the main stage, and they were going to get all those artists. And sometimes I would migrate over just to add a camera, or, you know, in the case of Rage Against the Machine, we needed another perspective. But in the case of the Tupac hologram, we knew we had that covered. So as much as I would have wanted to witness it with my own eyes, I was not actually there, sadly.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it
Were
was.
you?
I was there. It felt so weird. Like the whole crowd in the beginning, they weren't even cheering. Everyone was just like weirded out just seeing that. Like, I think they spent like $10 million in order to get all the whole projector. I don't know how that worked, but I read somewhere it was like $10 million they spent to just have that moment.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that made history. It really did. You know, and of course, people can talk about the ethics of all that. And I think that's totally legitimate. But you know, watching it later, I was, I'm not surprised the audience was stunned into silence. I mean, holy mackerel, was that an incredible thing to see?
It's
You
that that's
know,
that's gonna be the future of concerts. They're gonna start bringing back all the legends.
I know we'll be able to go see Frank Sinatra and Elvis, and
Elvis,
you know, yeah, we'll be able to go see Elvis.
Michael Jackson at Coachella.
Michael Jackson live. Yeah.
That would
You
have been
know,
cool.
what are some artists? Okay. So I've got a question for you. I'm going to answer it first and then I'm going to send it to you. I wish that Coachella had gotten Johnny Cash before he died. Um, what are some artists you would have liked to have seen at Coachella that have not played there yet and maybe have passed away, or, you know, maybe could play a future Coachella?
So number one, of course, Michael Jackson, because he's considered one of, if not the greatest, one of the greatest performers of all time, and he all his songs are really like he has nothing but hits. So seeing a Michael Jackson concert would have been awesome.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I mean, he was alive during Coachella. He was never, maybe he was too big to be at Coachella at the time.
Mhm.
But that would have been cool. And then another band that's been rumored a few times that I've wanted to see live is it's Metallica.
Mm-hmm.
I,
Mm-hmm.
I got I got to see Metallica at the Big Four Festival. Were you involved in the Big Four Festival?
No, I have seen Metallica before live, but I wasn't at the Big Four festival.
Yeah, I went to the Big Four, and man, I because it was when they were testing whether they could do back to back weekends. I remember, so it was 2011. I went to Coachella, and then the weekend after was Metallica. So I lost my voice because you get a Coachella flu or you just inhale too much. I don't know. I was just like I couldn't really talk. So I went to the Metallica concert, and I was just singing and like going crazy. And then I lost my voice again for another like 3 weeks. I couldn't speak for like a month straight just because from those back to back concerts. And I just want to see Metallica one more time. And at Coachella, I mean, they were rumored, I think, in 2017 or something. I don't know how legitimate the rumors were, but I think somebody asked Lars or somebody. It was like, "Oh, do you guys ever consider playing Coachella?" And they said they kind of wanted to, but I don't know if they're ever going to play there. So that's somebody I would like to see.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if they'd ever do it, but and Pearl Jam performs a lot and tours a lot, but I think Pearl Jam would be an interesting rock band to see
Oh yeah,
play there. Or Ed Vedder, Eddie Vedder performing. Maybe Pearl Jam could play main stage one night, and then Eddie Vedder on a different night could play one of the tents, do like an acoustic set or something like that. I know these are all total old guy bands, but yeah.
no, there's they brought ACDC and they brought in Guns N' Roses a couple years ago, so the possibilities there.
Yeah.
That's why I thought they were gonna bring in Metallica because it was following. I think it was first was ACDC, then it was Guns N' Roses, then I was like, oh, maybe they'll bring in Metallica, but it didn't happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We'll see. We'll see what they have in store for us. Yeah, I'm
What
sure
do
there'll
you?
be surprises.
So I was super bummed out with 2020. I mean,
Yeah.
there's bigger issues in the world, but I was hoping for October, and then it didn't happen. And now that it's already January, around this time, they always drop the lineup and pre-sale tickets and all that. So I'm assuming most likely it's not gonna happen in April. Like I'm pretty sure it's not gonna happen in April. But do you think there's a chance it might happen in October?
You know, fingers crossed, Angel. I hope it does. Um, you know, selfishly, it's ends up being one of the best months for me because I do the 2 weekends of Coachella, and sometimes I do Stagecoach too, as work. And what an amazing job. So I hope so. I hope that we can vaccinate fast enough. I think the only way they can do it is if people can show proof of vaccination. I think that's the only way. I mean, because if you think about it, I mean, first of all, who knows what the rules will be in California at that time? But the liability that any concert promoter would take on. I think what would be a shame is if they did a virtual Coachella. I think it made a ton of sense to release the movie 20 Years in the Desert right at Coachella time. I think that made a lot of sense. Put that out there, let people have a taste of Coachella when everyone's staying home. I've done a bunch of virtual concerts as a cinematographer, a bunch last year. And I did one with the Foo Fighters, which was an amazing, fun time. And it was, it was watched all over the world, and I guess it broke ticket selling records for a virtual show. But I'd be very sad to see Coachella do that. So I'm hoping for October. And if they can't get it to work, it's too much liability, too much risk, they can't do it. I do think we've got a real shot at April 22. But so fingers crossed. I'm sure you and I will be talking between now and then. Let's hope. And if it does happen, I think we should either do another one of these right before it, or meet up at the festival itself, and do a distance high five or something. I think everyone will be wearing masks. I think that they will probably be giving out masks, even if everyone's vaccinated. Maybe we'll all have to have proof on our phones that we're vaccinated, something like that.
I posted a video from Coachella 2019, and someone commented recently, maybe a couple months, why are people wearing masks even though COVID wasn't around at the time?
Right, totally.
I was just
Yeah.
laughing.
Yeah, exactly. I look back at pictures from Coachella and everyone's got, the bandanas around their faces or masks because of the dust.
Yeah.
Maybe it was just another example of Coachella not knowing it was ahead of the curve.
Yeah, it became a fashion thing too. Some people get like glow, like ones that light up, and
Yeah.
matching ones with their outfits and stuff. And I, I didn't have some, so a couple years, and you just like that's why you lose your voice or you get sick
Yes.
because you're walking from one stage to it's a mile long from one stage to the next, and people are kicking dirt and dust everywhere. So, and definitely like you're breathing in each other's spaces, So it's definitely gonna be mask mandatory, which kind of sucks because it's really hot at Coachella. But
Hmm.
I think with the a vaccine and I don't know, hopefully everything slows down. Yeah, maybe next April 2022.
Yeah. If it happens in October, maybe they do something like they put up fencing parallel to the front of the stage so that people, and then they put marks on the ground or something. I mean, I don't know how you do 90,000 people social distanced. I don't know how you do that, but I do think you see masks everywhere. I think that they probably pass out masks every morning as people walk in. Um, I do think it helps that it's outside. I think it helps that it's in the sun.
Yeah.
Um, I think that they have hand sanitizer stations everywhere. I think they probably have people walking around spraying, almost like usher type people, spraying hand sanitizer in people's hands, or maybe spraying off, things, common areas where people touch fencing or whatever.
Yeah.
So hopefully, with some combination of enough people getting vaccinated, maybe it can happen. I think it's maybe a 50-50 shot for the fall. I think it gets much more likely next spring.
Yeah, I agree with that statement too. Yeah, when in regards, if you want to do another podcast, I have a this is my podcast studio downtown Indio. So
Cool.
whenever ever you come down to the valley, definitely reach out. We could do a podcast, and definitely closer to the festival whenever that happens than any major announcements.
Yeah, so what I'll do is I'm always down there a couple nights early. So on one of those first nights, if we can schedule it, I'll come down and I'll come to the studio and we'll do a full thing talking about the festival that's about to happen.
Yeah, awesome. I can't wait. Is there anything you want to talk about, promote, anything you're working on right now?
Well, so as I mentioned earlier, I'm a cinematographer director, but I've directed 3 feature films. My first feature film as a director was Coachella, the original film, which was released theatrically in 2006. It's on iTunes and it's on Amazon streaming, probably other services as well. Just look for the year 2006. I recommend seeing both films. Chris Perkel's film 20 Years in the Desert is excellent, and I think it's a nice companion piece. I think they do not replace each other. My film is very much a concert movie, a ton of music, whereas 20 Years in the Desert is more a straight documentary with some music in it, but there's not performances in the same way that there is in the original documentary. But I think they're both strong, and I think they're both worth seeing for Coachella fans or just music fans in general. And then if somebody wants to see some of my newer work, in 2019, I released a film, end of 2019, so it's still very fresh. A film, action film called The Mongolian Connection, which is on Amazon and iTunes.
Okay.
It's also available on Blu-ray. But and then I did a film called Channeling, which has also been titled Bloodshot. That was released in 2013 or 2014, I think. Yeah, so people, please see the stuff. I'd love to. You could find me on Instagram. My name is Yay for Stuff, YAYFORSTUFF. On Instagram, come find me and hit me up with a message. Happy to talk. Happy to talk Coachella. Happy to talk movies anytime.
Awesome. Yeah, yeah. I'm a big movie fan as well. Maybe we could talk about movies in the next one. But yeah, it's a pleasure talking to you. I'll put all the links in the description to your Instagram and maybe your IMDb so people can check out the movies and definitely check out those documentaries that you mentioned because they're really like you said it. One of them shows you what it was like when it started. And it does feel like that film look. It has that film look.
Hmm.
And then the new one, of course, is more new modern produced like HD and it talks that one kind of talks about the whole thing from the beginning to what it is now and it's about to be. So yeah, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks so much, Angel. We'll see you soon.
Yeah, I'll see you next time. Thank you.
Sounds good. Bye-bye.
Bye.